right in front of the school.
I'm scared of getting hooked.
Police officer, search warrant! Leave them to yell like...
They're dealing dope out there. We're gonna catch them.
We're not gonna tolerate it.
My hands would start to shake and I couldn't...
Under arrest, Will.
I ain't do nothing, man.
No child is immune.
I'm a drug addict.
They're really taking over our community.
Cracks, everything cracks.
They do anything fun.
The streets got him again.
This cocaine ain't nothing but the devil.
I've seen somebody die, yeah.
Cocaine, marijuana, Quaaludes, you name it, I had.
Any fool can sell drugs.
It's getting worse. It's not getting better.
None of us is safe, and I don't care where you live.
I'm truly scared for my children.
Good evening. I'm Peter Jennings. You know, in many places, it's a pretty rotten evening. In many parts of America tonight, people are risking their jobs, their families, and their lives by doing drugs. We're talking about middle and upper class families in the comfort of their homes, as well as those people who are huddled over a needle or crack inside one of the nation's abandoned buildings. As sure as tomorrow is Monday, lives are going to be ruined as a result. Somebody out there is going to overdose. Some cop may be killed in the so-called war against drugs. Someone may die in a fight over the vast profits which this plague upon our land is pumping into the economy. Tomorrow, when the work week begins, someone on the job with you may be using drugs. A doctor you need may be on drugs. So might the pilot or the bus driver who takes you somewhere. When your kids go off to school tomorrow, have you any idea how exposed they will be to drugs? How available and how cheap drugs are? No, we are not overstating it when we call it a plague. We're not going to spend time tonight telling you how illegal drugs got here. They are here. And they are eating away at the national fabric of life. We have a national emergency. The Federal Drug Enforcement Agency now says that crack, which was originally designed as the poor man's cocaine, is readily available in 46 states. For this program, we've asked a number of ABC's affiliates around the country, as well as our own reporters, to help explain just how wide and how deep drugs go. Recognize a street corner sign? We've discovered that in almost every community there is at least one familiar corner where you can easily get whatever you want. And that's where we begin. On a street corner that may be near you.
This is Clements Avenue in Charleston, South Carolina. The police call it Crack Alley.
25th Street and Broadway is probably the most active narcotic area in the city of Phoenix.
This is Bass Street and Banner Avenue in Columbus, Georgia, where you can pick up crack cocaine from kids settled in on the street.
Streets around Philadelphia's 8th and Butler harbor a flourishing drug trade.
San Jose apartments are a drug pusher's playground.
This crack house isn't the only one in this Dayton neighborhood.
Here in Bakersfield, city parks like this one have become favorite hangouts for drug dealers and users.
We're at the corner of Great Neck Road and Albany Avenue in North Amityville on Long Island. The problem we have here is crack.
In Tampa, Florida, when drug users want to buy crack cocaine in this city, this is where they come.
It's believed to be a drug-dealing den in the heart of Seattle Central.
This week's bust in Austin netted more than...
Manchester, New Hampshire, at the corner of Lake and Union Avenues. If you want to buy cocaine, you can come to this very corner.
Denver, 33rd and Holly area, has become a den for pushers who sell drugs.
Anything you want, you can find on the south side or that side.
So how did it get to be like this? You know and we know it has to do with money. There's enormous money to be made selling illegal drugs, especially cocaine, and its even more dangerous derivative, crack. Americans now spend $20 billion a year on cocaine. $20 billion.
What you putting in your nose? Is that where all your money goes?
Drug dealers doing as much business as car dealers. Meet the Chambers family of Detroit. That's family member William Jackson. Detroit police say the Chambers gang ran a multi-million-dollar cocaine business. This homemade videotape was confiscated by police. It is testimony to the wealth and the arrogance of those who deal drugs.
Money, money, money! We rich, goddammit! 150,000 here. Ain't no telling how much up there. I'm gonna go buy me 3 cars tomorrow.
The police believe that the Chambers family made between $15 and $30 million dealing drugs. They believe the money paid for Larry Chambers' home.
This is the dining room.
This is a 24-karat gold faucet.
And vacations on the family farm.
Today we had an accident. There was no one seriously hurt.
There is plenty of money to go around.
Should we throw these ones away, man, since we got $500,000? Well, I'll tell you what we can do. We can give it to the poor. That's exactly what I say, too. We'll just donate those to the poor. We still got about $1 million upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
With that kind of money to be made, membership in gangs like the Chambers family is exploding, especially in the inner cities. And the gangs are going after enormous cocaine profits.
Being in a gang called the Disciples, high on crack, toting a machine gun.
This is organized crime that was once controlled by whites. With the growth of these new gangs, it is increasingly black. Their first victims are their poor inner-city neighbors. After that, there were no frontiers, just targets of opportunity all across the country. If this were McDonald's or Wendy's, we would call it franchising. But we are not talking hamburgers. They call Los Angeles the gang capital. 70,000 members, 600 gangs. Just last weekend, the two most violent, the Crips and the Bloods, had another territorial dispute. 1 person died, 12 were wounded. It's what happens in the business of cocaine.
They sell the rock cocaine or crack on the streets or from heavily fortified rock houses, often employing 11 and 12-year-olds known as peewees. These apprentices are used as lookouts, sometimes even as salesmen. Young boys can make more than $400 a day selling drugs.
We have gangs that are taking out of the city of Los Angeles about $1 million a week.
The gangs have carved up parts of Los Angeles into exclusive sales territories, even using graffiti on walls to mark their domain and warn others to stay away. But like any successful businesses, they still compete for market share, often with violent consequences. Some 387 people died here in gang-related violence last year. This year, the death toll is running even higher.
It's getting worse. It's not getting better.
Police are trying to make it better with special sweeps arresting hundreds of suspected gang members. They've even rolled out an armored battering ram to attack fortified crack houses. But so far it hasn't worked. The gangs continue to saturate this city, so successful they've taken their drug trade beyond the streets of Los Angeles.
The Crips and the Bloods have swarmed eastward, peddling their stock in trade. They sell crack cocaine at $25 or $30 for every rock. The key to this growing criminal kingdom is high tech.
Suspect is a black male, early 20s.
Cellular car phones and beepers reach out and expand their drug network. They've pushed their drugs past the Rocky Mountains as far as New Jersey, tripling and quadrupling their profits.
Los Angeles is becoming the hose that is spraying the rest of the country with cocaine.
2,000 miles from Los Angeles, the Minneapolis police have identified the Crips and have stormed their fortified drug houses. In Kansas City, LA's Crips are competing with Jamaican gangs for drug dollars. They've both opened as many as 100 crack houses. And gangs from other cities are on the move too. The Chicago gangs, the El Rukns and the Vice Lords and others. 13,000 members spread through the Midwest. They are in Minneapolis too, and Milwaukee, and even smaller towns like Racine, Wisconsin. The Miami boys from Florida are moving their crack through the Deep South and up the eastern seaboard. They have carved up Atlanta into 5 drug territories. Each can pull in as much as $300,000 a day. And the Jamaican gangs, the Rima and Riverton posses among them, which normally operate in New York and Florida, they seem to be everywhere. Sometimes they all seem to be everywhere.
He is 19 years old, from Los Angeles, and arrested in North Las Vegas for drug trafficking.
He's from Los Angeles. He's from Pomona. He's from Los Angeles.
Police in Portland, Oregon estimate as many as 500 Bloods and Crips have arrived, bringing with them fear and violence.
There have been 275 gang-related incidents and 20 shootings over the past 8 months. Everyone here thought it was something that only happened in the big cities.
Portland is starting to look and feel like Los Angeles. The fear, people are afraid to leave their houses.
The Crips and the Bloods have left their marks in Charles and Esther Ford's Portland neighborhood. You can see the gang graffiti from their living room.
How angry are you?
I'm scared to say. I really am.
It's the same story everywhere. Consider historic Charlestown, West Virginia. George Washington's brother founded it in 1786. Population 3,000 with a police force of 8.
Charlestown's a very small, quiet town peopled by warm-hearted, gentle people, and we're actually being occupied by pushers and users and dope fiends.
At least 50 Jamaican gang members have invaded, fearlessly setting up an open-air drug market, offering their crack to anyone who has the cash.
They're not residents, but they own more of the town than we do.
Like so many other parts of the country, no one ever thought the gangs would come here.
How bad can the gang problem be? Probably not much worse than on this bus line in San Francisco. They call it the Savage Line. It snakes its way through the drug trafficking areas on the eastern side of the city. At night, they assign a police car to accompany the buses. It's the only way to keep order after countless criminal acts up and down the route. The buses have been stoned, the drivers attacked. The trouble is you can't put police cars everywhere. And if you could, very often the cops would be outgunned.
M16s, MAC-10 machine guns, semi-automatic pistols. These are the weapons of choice among heavyweight drug traffickers. Federal authorities say these guns are being used by American drug dealers and by the foreign gangs, mostly illegal immigrants, who police categorize as incredibly brutal and who have come to this country to deal narcotics and death. Like the urban ghetto gangs, the foreign dealers also operate nationwide according to the Drug Enforcement Agency. Some examples. Just 10 days ago, hundreds of Sicilian gangsters were arrested for smuggling heroin into New York for nationwide distribution. Criminals from Thailand smuggle heroin into Kansas. Mexicans control the heroin trade in Oregon and Washington State. Colombians distribute cocaine in Texas and Florida. Jamaicans sell crack in 15 U.S. cities. In fact, those infamous Jamaican gangs are believed responsible for more than 800 homicides in the past 3 years.
Never in the 20 years I've been in this area have we had a major crossfire problem in urban areas. And now increasingly, we have the problem of innocent citizens getting caught in the crossfire between warring criminal gangs.
5-year-old Tawala Shaw was killed by Jamaican drug dealers in front of his suburban home. His mother describes her little boy's last words.
And he said to him, "Daddy, I got shot. Tell Mommy I got shot." And then he crawled on his belly and went back. But they were still firing.
In Colorado Springs, 4-year-old Eddie Sanchez was killed by a crack dealer. In affluent Westwood, California, a drug shootout resulted in the death of 27-year-old Karen Toshima, who was hit by a stray bullet while walking down the street.
Because the drug gangs use heavy firepower, they simply outgun police. But that may change. The DEA will soon become the first U.S. police agency in history to issue machine guns to all its agents.
More sophisticated arms, more firepower. I think any of those actions are justified given the situation.
And so, the emergence of drug gangs has led to a change in criminal behavior on the streets of America. A lethal change.
It's amazing how drugs have brought so many more of us in touch with violence. More of our streets and more of our neighborhoods are being turned into battlegrounds because of illegal drugs.
Drugs, A Plague Upon the Land, with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by AT&T. In long-distance services, information and network systems, telephones, and computers, AT&T is the right choice.
This is as close to peacetime war as you're going to get.
Listen carefully to the voice of Michael Levine. He worked the streets for 23 years as a drug enforcement agent.
The amount of deaths involved are probably higher if you want to tally up all the murders and agents shot and cops killed and guys tortured to death. Man, this is a peacetime war.
The peacetime war in Queens, New York. Officer Edward Byrne, 22, a rookie, barely on the police force a year, shot to death while sitting in his squad car, guarding the house of a witness in a drug case. This cop killing was an assassination, a warning from crack dealers. It's a very high price. The streets are not safe for witnesses, civilians, or cops. But after all, it's just New York City. No, it's not just New York City. Take a look at these other faces elsewhere in the land. William Ramos, Pharr, Texas. Floyd Moore, Bay City, Florida. John Weiss, Shively, Kentucky. 69 police officers killed in the last decade trying to arrest drug dealers. That's a very high price to pay. Listen again to Eddie Byrne's father.
If our son Eddie, sitting in a police car, representing and protecting us, can be wasted by scum, then none of us is safe. And I don't care where you live.
None of us is safe. Pretty powerful thought. No matter where you live, pretty sobering thought. Until last October, not many people had paid attention to Midlothian, Texas. Now Midlothian and New York have something in common.
What they have in common is the killing of a cop over drugs. It has shaken this mostly white middle-class community, a place people move to escape big city crime, a small town with just a typical small-town drug problem. The victim was George Rayfield, 21, who, like Officer Byrne in New York, was a rookie policeman. Rayfield was trying to do something about drugs, and he ended up in a field, shot to death execution style. The young cop was posing as a student at the local high school. His orders, catch the students selling drugs. But police think he was found out and lured to his death. 3 students, one 17, 2 only 16, and a woman were arrested and charged with murder. It shocked the townspeople and angered some students who resented being labeled druggies.
We're kind of upset because one or two teenagers have been able to spoil the whole image of what I feel is a morally upright high school.
At Officer Rayfield's funeral, teenagers sat alongside police and thought about a man who gave his young life trying to save others from drugs.
George was trying to do what he could so that evil would not triumph. Amazing grace.
The drug problem here is probably no worse than in any rural American town, but this tragedy illustrates the vulnerability of even the smallest of communities.
Like me,
Another dead cop because of drugs. Any community should hurt. And here's something else that hurts. Lawless cops going into the drug business for themselves. Of course, the bad ones are just a small percentage of the police dedicated to our safety, but their numbers seem to be growing with the notion that drugs in America are now an accepted way of life. So why shouldn't lawless cops take a piece of the action themselves? Listen to what's on this FBI videotape. That man on the bed is a Tennessee sheriff, and he's conducting his illegal narcotics business.
If I raid Soapy and get 18,000 Quaaludes before they get to the damn jail, nobody knows how many there is.
Actually, Dennis Trotter is a former president of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, twice Sheriff of the Year. Trotter is now in prison for running a criminal operation out of the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. In the last 5 years, they've arrested 11 rural sheriffs in Tennessee. Most of the corruption charges are drug-related. In Miami, dozens of cops have been arrested in what is probably the worst police scandal in Florida history. Police officers splitting up millions of dollars in drug money. The police chief says 100 cops could be involved. Take a look at men who chose to break the law they swore to uphold because of drug money. In New York City, 24 police officers were arrested in one drug scandal in just one precinct. One former cop, Henry Winters, said he not only stole the drugs, but turned into a drug dealer himself.
I wound up taking the money, putting the money in my pocket. Eventually went into taking the drugs, giving it to another officers that had a connection with a drug dealer, and eventually the lowest part of our life was giving the drugs back to a drug dealer for resale on the street.
Policemen actually in the drug business. It has surfaced in so many places around the country that it has had a dramatic effect on many honest cops.
The fact that they committed those crimes with the uniform, it affects me, it affects my morale, it affects the way I feel, it affects me tremendously. And that's the anger that I have, is the fact that they did it to tarnish this uniform.
That anger and low morale combined with the high risk has led many officers to turn in their badges.
For the police fighting narcotics, it is a dirty, thankless, and frustrating job that never ends.
You're under arrest for delivery of cocaine.
It is also incredibly dangerous, and police carry the scars. In an undercover drug deal, Treasury agent Alex Diotri was shot 4 times at point-blank range. His partner was killed.
You live with the memories, or should I say nightmares, and that never goes away.
5 years after the shooting, Diotri lives in constant pain that is shared by his wife and children.
They look at me today when I go to the beach and they see all these scars and these bullet holes in my chest and my back. And they say, "Daddy, what's that?" And I try to explain it to them.
For many narcotics officers, the wounds are psychological. Years of fear, frustration, and abuse take their toll.
The officers become victims. Their families become victims. The mental stress that they have to go to.
Officer Gilfredo Mugara turned in his badge after a drug dealer overpowered him and put a gun to his head.
Just ruined my whole life.
A hidden microphone recorded Mugara's screams when he was finally rescued by fellow officers.
What happens to you every time you hear that? I probably won't be able to sleep for the next 3 days. I go back to that day, and I realize that I was dead.
While many officers still believe the fight is worthwhile, others feel it is futile and that no one cares.
Cops have always understood that they might have to give their lives defending the rest of us, but for the good ones to see their badge tarnished by what drugs do to the corrupt ones, no wonder some of them give up. Drugs have done that.
So, what's on the menu this week?
I got...
Traces of cocaine were found in Dwight Gooden's system.
Richard Dreyfuss asked the judge if he could be placed in a drug rehabilitation.
Richardson became the first active player to be barred from the NBA for drug use.
Andy Gibb hospitalized for involvement with drugs.
I started snorting cocaine, and then I started injecting cocaine.
I couldn't stop. I put the pipe down, it jumped back in my hand. I couldn't stop 5 minutes.
One of his doctors warned Boy George to give up heroin if he wants to live.
Comedian John Belushi was found dead in Los Angeles of a drug overdose.
Ballet star Patrick Bissell's death due to cocaine and other
Len
drugs.
Bias, the all-night party, the cocaine, and sudden death at 22. As time goes by, we are saddened, but somehow less surprised when the stars in our society are contaminated by drugs. We are surprised when so many people don't get the message. Not the people without hope, but the casual user, the ones who think it's chic, the folks who just snort a line or two on the weekend, the ones who think they have it under control. When they traded cocaine as well as stocks and bonds on Wall Street last year, it generated lots of publicity. It seemed to go with the greed and speed of young men and women on the make. But it can be a problem in any workplace.
When it was Friday and it was payday, I might go out to the bar at lunchtime and cash my check, and score, and then bring it back to work.
I had a point with somebody, and it was like, I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk on the phone.
All sorts of workers on drugs and all sorts of employers paying an enormous price. In 1986 alone, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimates that drugs in the workplace cost American companies $60 billion in lost productivity. $60 billion.
My eyes would be all glassy, my hands would start to shake, and I couldn't function.
And where there are drugs, there is more than money to be lost. There is danger on the job.
A 17-month undercover investigation at the Whirlpool plants in Marion and Findlay, Ohio, culminated in the arrests of 84 people on felony drug charges. The investigation started after Whirlpool employees who were fearful their safety was being jeopardized complained about coworkers using drugs on the job.
People were taking substance before, after, or during a lunch break.
No wonder business is cracking down.
This is the Albuquerque Publishing Company, where 2 years ago, an increase in on-the-job accidents led management to investigate employee drug abuse. The concern that workers on drugs using dangerous plant equipment made the prospect of serious injury very real. Management conducted a surprise search on employees working the newspaper's overnight shift. Some employees complained that they were being treated like criminals, but the company did not back down and has continued its anti-drug stance.
I think the people understand better now that we're not going to tolerate it. I mean, it's just that simple. We're not going to have it. And whatever we have to do to prevent it, that's what we're going to do.
Companies everywhere are so anxious to keep drugs out, they are forcing the issue, requiring drug testing. Our own company among them. If you want a job at ABC, you must take a urine test. If you don't pass, you don't work. It may be an invasion of privacy, but increasingly it's a fact of life.
It's a darn shame when they judge a man by the quality of his urine over the quality of his work.
A drug test, just as a metal detector at an airport, is designed to reduce the hazards to everybody.
But at what cost? Sampling urine for illegal drugs can be unreliable. More serious, it may violate the constitutional right to privacy. Now the courts are being asked to decide the legality of drug testing. 2 California women are suing a publisher. They were denied jobs, they say, because they refused to be tested.
I felt the drug and alcohol test was totally irrelevant to this particular position. I felt it was an extreme invasion of my privacy.
Federal employees are questioning their loss of privacy. Customs workers, some whose job it is to find drugs, don't want to be tested themselves. The Supreme Court will hear the case.
Got 11-14. You're clear to land 14 right, 3 behind.
On other fronts, the administration is charging ahead. Transportation workers such as these air traffic controllers are screened, and the government wants all employees with sensitive jobs to be tested. The Justice Department is preparing its people with this video.
Drug abuse can happen here. Indeed, it has happened here.
Department lawyers have hired their own lawyer to sue.
It's a very good idea to make a war on drugs. But if the first casualty of such a war is the Bill of Rights, then it seems to me some very important questions are raised about what kind of country we live in.
What kind of country do we live in? Privacy traded for safety, guilty until proven innocent, tested. Of course, not testing has its costs. What if people we depend on for our safety, even our health, were on drugs and we didn't know it? One treatment center estimates that between 10 and 20% of all medical professionals are drug or alcohol abusers. Listen to these recovering addicts, doctors and nurses.
I had something in my system 24 hours a day.
I managed to
to maintain a private practice for like 3 years using cocaine. And then I started freebasing cocaine.
When I was taking drugs myself, I was taking them ultimately just to get through the day.
The drug controlled me. Nothing else mattered. My job didn't matter. Patients didn't matter.
I really believed that I was not a danger to patients. I know now that I certainly must have been.
And what is the danger from other people we depend on? There are school bus drivers on drugs. And there are other people we depend on for our safety, who we need desperately to be drug-free.
Chase, Maryland, January 4th, 1987. A Conrail engine rear-ends a passenger train. 16 dead, 170 injured. Come on, move over, move over. Come on, move back, move out the way.
Blood and urine tests taken after the crash showed that Conrail engineer Ricky Gates had used marijuana sometime prior to the crash.
Engineer Gates had driven his locomotive through a red light shortly after sharing a marijuana cigarette with his brakeman. For those Americans with a drug dependency, the matter is serious enough. But if they're entrusted with the safety of the public, if they control a train or a truck or a fire hose, then the person in danger is you. In Durango, Colorado, a commuter plane crashes, killing 9. Cocaine is found in the dead pilot's body. In Palmdale, California, 34 air traffic controllers are suspended for using cocaine and hashish. In Nebraska or Michigan, in fact, at 2/3 of the nation's nuclear plants, workers have been found stoned on the job. In Arizona, truckers make drug deals on their citizens' band radios.
Smoking dope and nose candy, kick it back to cock-a-doodle-doo.
In Plainfield, New Jersey, 16 firemen test positive for cocaine or marijuana.
I'm shocked at the number. You're going through a fire of any substance, house, building. You want a guy that's not high, a straight, clean guy.
It's not merely a railroad problem. That's just one heartbreaking example. This February, Ricky Gates pled guilty to causing the carnage at Chase, Maryland.
I cannot begin to imagine the pain and the grief I have caused the accident victims and their families. I am sorry. I have relived the events of January 4th over and over in my mind, and the pain never goes away.
No, for some people, the pain will never go away. Drugs in the workplace cost lives, and they cost jobs. And because of that, we lose a measure of our privacy.
Drugs, A Plague Upon the Land, with Peter Jennings, will continue in a moment.
That could wipe out the nation's information banks.
These people are so bright to come up with this stuff, but so stupid not to consider what might happen.
Monday, watch ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
The students were allegedly selling an assortment of drugs, including... Police had just arrested 35 students on drug charges.
It's not a problem anywhere in the country for anyone, any age, to get any drugs.
Columbus police arrested a Starling Middle School student last night, leaving a crack house.
An 18-year-old Alpena High School student was arrested on a charge of possession of LSD.
Crystal methadone, cocaine, acid, marijuana, Quaaludes, you name it, I had it.
If you hang around people who do it, your peer pressure is going to suck you in.
Police had arrest warrants out for 70 students at Patrick Henry and 3 former students.
This has become an all too familiar picture. Alleged student drug dealers in handcuffs.
It's easier to get cocaine or pot than it is to go down and buy a bottle of beer.
I don't think there's a school around that doesn't have a drug problem.
Those are our kids talking, and they know what they're talking about. Even though cocaine and marijuana use in the high schools is down, and that is good news about changing attitudes, the fact remains that by the time they become high school seniors, more than half of our kids have tried illegal drugs. Have you any idea what that is costing schools in the campaign against drugs?
I'm going to carry this back, and any drug pusher I see trying to enter into those 35 doors, I'm going to beat the hell out of him.
Joe Clark, the tough-talking principal in Paterson, New Jersey, has become a symbol of the war against drugs in our schools.
Any fool can sell drugs.
The ammunition in that war is costly. Untold amounts of time and money siphoned away from students and teachers to fight an advancing enemy. The road that takes drugs to school can lead anywhere, even to this alley in the heartland community of Lexington, Kentucky, where junkies ditch their dirty needles in the shadow of Johnson Elementary School.
I just tell the children for every hypodermic needle that they find, I will pay them 50 cents out of my own pocket.
And you found how many?
33.
It's cost the principal here $16.50 of her own money to protect these children from drugs. But schools and cities are paying much more. In Lexington, 4 police officers work year-round in schools to prevent drug abuse. Annual cost, $142,000. Add a drug counselor, $32,000. Then security, training, and supplies, $46,000. Total estimated cost, $220,000. That equals the salaries of 8 teachers.
I think it's unfortunate that we have to spin off those resources to this kind of a problem. But it has to be done because it is a problem which keeps us from our main mission of education.
We can't teach a child to read if they're high on something.
I think it's completely destroying the educational process. We're spending more time concerned about drugs now than we really do with the formal education.
Cops in class, searching students, guarding schools. That takes money, but the human cost is far greater. The lost potential of kids like Mike, who told a group of teens what drugs cost him.
I failed the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Add failure to the time and money drugs are costing our schools, and the result is a painful lesson. Drugs are stealing America's future.
Talk about a lost future. Look at these babies, our youngest victims, born to mothers abusing drugs, abandoned by those mothers, left to be cared for by a medical system like the educational system that's being undermined by the pervasiveness of drugs.
Robert took his first steps in a hospital corridor because he's been abandoned. And because his mother is a drug addict, foster homes and adoption agencies also don't want him. So he boards here, a so-called border baby. An estimated 3,000 border babies line nurseries and fill pediatric wards around the country. Innocent children held prisoner by America's drug epidemic. Children who are also crowding out those who need this limited space.
We literally are getting to the point from time to time when we're having trouble finding places to put children who are acutely ill.
And the damage is getting worse. The number of babies born to drug addicts is up 1,000% in 10 years. This is an addict high on the animal tranquilizer PCP.
You get kicked, you get spit at, punched, and it takes its toll.
It took 7 hospital workers to restrain this addict. There are only 10 workers to man the whole ward.
That can tie up not only a lot of people, but a couple of rooms, and that's going to back up the other patients waiting for whatever thing they've come in with.
In the last 10 years, the havoc in hospitals caused by drugs has been startling. Emergency room admissions up from 1,000 to almost 10,000. Overdoses up 300%. Deaths from just cocaine up 1,000%. And the burden will get worse because of AIDS. 1/3 of all AIDS cases now involve drug addicts. Most get it from sharing needles. It's estimated that the drug epidemic added $1 billion to the nation's health care bill last year. It strains facilities, overtaxes doctors and nurses, and affects the quality of care for all of us. It's an epidemic which experts say threatens to unravel the entire fabric of our health care system.
And what about the criminal justice system? The courts and jails are bursting at the seams because of the drug problem. In a sense, it's because of the war on drugs.
Under arrest, Willie.
Here's an irony for you. The more drug arrests, the worse the problem gets. There just isn't any place to put all the drug dealers. Drug suspects are routinely ROR'd, released on their own recognizance without bail. Listen to this drug dealer.
In 1986, I was arrested 9 times for sales and possession. And every time they would arrest me, I'd either make bail, I'd be ROR'd, and I'd leave on a Tuesday, and I'd make a sale on Wednesday, and I'd be back on Thursday.
And it's happening all over the country.
Police in Portland, Oregon thought they'd have little trouble sending the man in the blue cap videotaped dealing drugs to jail. They were wrong.
Today we transported him down to the jail. We were informed that the jail is full, so we gave him a ticket to be in court in a couple of weeks. He's back on the street right now.
That kind of turnaround, say prosecutors, undermines respect for the system and only makes our streets more dangerous. But talk about dangerous, many of those already convicted are being set free, not because they've served their time, but solely to make room for other inmates. 35 states are now under court order not to increase inmate population unless they can find more space for hundreds of inmates. A single cell costs from $50,000 to $75,000. Your taxes at work.
We've sort of innovative. We've used old motels. We've changed those. We've used schoolhouses. We've used office buildings. We've used tents.
Get arrested in New Orleans and you'll probably wind up camping out.
Well, all right, defendant's parole.
Court dockets are overcrowded too. This is New York's experimental end court for narcotics. No indictments, no grand juries, no trial. Here, last year alone, more than 80,000 people were given the chance to plead guilty in exchange for shorter and swifter sentences. It's helped in New York, but the court crunch is nationwide.
I would say half to 2/3 of our criminal docket is narcotic related.
And as the crime rate rises, the revolving doors of U.S. prisons spin faster. The courts, overwhelmed by drug cases, become increasingly clogged, leaving the public dissatisfied and unprotected. The criminal justice system itself has become yet another victim of drugs.
The courts and the prisons, the educational and medical systems, they're America's vital systems. And when they're unable to service properly, you can't miss what drugs are doing to the country.
Every day, over 30 million.
The tide of battle has turned, and we're beginning to win the crusade for a drug-free America.
The drug business is awful. The drug business is destructive to our lifestyle and the security of this country, and we've simply got to face it for what it is. That is a major threat.
233 persons in the United States and Italy are being charged in the operations of a Sicilian mafia drug trafficking ring.
Please, man, get your hand up. Hurry up. Sure we got 10 in there.
What should you do when someone offers you drugs? What will you do when someone offers you drugs? I can't hear you. Louder.
The First Lady has been tireless, and to some extent she highlights the fact that the federal government has spent millions for drug education and treatment and billions in an effort to stop drugs at the border. The government seized 43 tons of cocaine last year, 43 tons, more than ever before. But it makes only a small difference. The drugs just keep on coming.
Take a body count of how many people we've lost to communism and a body count of how many people we lost to drug addiction. And I'll tell you how to measure national security.
Whether you measure it in terms of national security or in terms of personal security doesn't really matter. Either way, we're all losing. And so around the country, from the smallest towns to the biggest cities, people are fighting back on their own.
We're tired because the gangsters and gangbangers and dope dealers have decided to take our community from us.
In this Texas city, parents hope by starting young, their children can grow old, drug-free.
In the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, the patrols are made up of men from the neighborhood, about 25 of them working in 24-hour shifts.
A couple of suspicious-looking
that are terrorizing our neighborhoods that we are tired of and we need some help getting them
The young
out.
people of this community decided to turn the tables. 50,000 young people are saying no to drugs and
The problem
drinking.
is school drug traffic. A recent survey shows almost half of Boise's children have tried illicit drugs. Boiseans started Parents and Youth Against Drug Abuse.
In Detroit, two neighbors, Butch Parisi and Perry Kent, set fire to this suspected crack house after...
It had to be done. If you don't take care of your own neighborhood and protect it, then there's no use living in it.
Not worth living in your neighborhood. We don't have specific answers to the crisis we've identified tonight. But like you, we're kind of angry, and we have a lot of questions. If this is a war on drugs, and everyone from the president on down calls it that, shouldn't it be fought like a war? If we could prove that the drug problem in the United States was directed by a communist power, what do you think would happen then? Wouldn't the government be mobilized? Wouldn't the best minds in the country be enlisted to plan strategy? There'd certainly be no limit to the amount of money available to fight the war. Every institution in the country would be involved. No one would say, it doesn't affect me. We're in the middle of a campaign to elect the next president of the United States. If this is war, shouldn't the men who want that job tell us how they intend to defend the nation in this time of war? And we don't mean one more paragraph in their campaign speeches. And if this is war, isn't it legitimate to debate the question of military action? Should the military stand shoulder to shoulder on the nation's frontier? And would it make a difference anyway? Some people have actually suggested international search and destroy missions in those countries where the bulk of the cocaine originates. What about international law? And if it ever happened, wouldn't they simply grow the stuff somewhere else? That's what makes the home front so important. One thing we should keep in perspective, you can't win the war against drugs unless you attack poverty and illiteracy. And remember, for the poor coca farmer in Bolivia, as well as the poor kid dealing drugs in our streets, it's the only way they're making any money. Here at home, what do we say to those people who demand the death penalty for the drug dealers making war on us? We have no idea if it would be effective, let alone humane. We do know there comes a time when a nation looks at itself and sees that it's jeopardized. How many of you have said tonight, there but for the grace of God go my kids? Question is, how badly do we want to win this war? Good night.
Drugs, A Plague Upon the Land with Peter Jennings has been brought to you by AT&T. In long-distance services, information and network systems, telephones and computers, AT&T is the right choice.